This is the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, episode 690, 4-part distance learning instructional framework that works, with Dr. Nancy Frey, sponsored by Advancement Courses. Welcome to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, hosted by author, educator, speaker, and mom, the Cool Cat teacher, Vicki Davis. Heading back into school, we have no idea what to expect, but one thing is certain, distance learning will have to be tailored according to the age of the learner. With that in mind, Vicki is joined today by Dr. Nancy Frey, professor at San Diego State University in educational leadership, focusing on policies and practices in literacy and school leadership. For over 2 decades, her work in partnership with Douglas Fisher has been dedicated to providing teachers with needed resources to help students attain their goals and aspirations. Together, they have co-authored many books, including the Distance Learning Playbook. Well, let's get into it. Enjoy the podcast.
Hello, remarkable educators. Do you have a Donors Choose project that needs funding? Tune in at the end of the episode to learn how you can get your project funded through today's sponsor, Advancement Courses. Thank you to Advancement Courses for sponsoring today's episode. Today we're talking with Dr. Nancy Frey, co-author of the Distance Learning Playbook and quite a few other incredible books as well. She's a professor at San Diego State University in educational leadership. So Nancy, today we're going to talk about distance learning and the young learner. Now, I have actually heard some educators say, if we have to go to distance learning for these young learners, we need to just forget it and not do anything. What do you say to that?
Well, I think that it's absolutely essential that we are regularly making contact with the youngest learners and with their families on a regular basis. And yes, I agree that distance learning for a 5-year-old is going to look different than a distance learning experience for a 15-year-old, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible.
So how does it look? Because, folks are like, well, screen time, they just can't be on Zoom, for the whole day. And totally, we agree with that. But what does distance learning look like for a 5-year-old that's effective?
I totally agree. We definitely cannot have them looking at a screen all day long. But what we can do is really think about, for the time that we do have them in a live session, how can we make the most of that? What are the most important things that happen? And I would argue that in those spaces, when there is a live session, that what we are especially foregrounding is the social and emotional learning of children, making sure that every time that we're with them, that we're checking in, that we're building closeness and relationships with them. And a second aspect of that is to really think carefully about what it is that families can do and what it is that they can't do. And I don't mean that in terms of their capabilities, but rather, what are those things that are really going to strain a family? That's what we want to take up. So when we're looking at reading instruction, for example, and math instruction, we want to build on the collaboration that can happen among learners, and then let families continue with that in very authentic and naturalistic ways that happen in their household.
What do you say to the parents who say, well, I'm not a teacher? I'll tell you, we have an amazing K-5 teacher. I've told her from the beginning she could be a YouTube star because she does these beautiful videos about how to do letter sounds. And the parents absolutely loved it because there's just things that parents don't know. But, there are parents out there who feel like, well, you're giving me a packet and I'm stuck teaching this whole thing.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I have lots of empathy for families that had to be in that position when we were doing crisis teaching in the spring. And I'd like to separate out crisis teaching from distance learning, where we can be more planful. We've had a chance to be able to catch our breath, and now we can be more planful. We don't want to put families in the position of having to be their child's teacher. But what we can do is that we can have lots of communication with families and make sure that we're reinforcing for them the very naturalistic things that they can do in their classroom. I think sometimes parents undersell or undervalue what it is that they bring. And when we say to them, when you're making dinner and you count the number of ingredients with your child, you're helping him to learn. When you read a bedtime story, because you love that lap time, you're helping her to learn. I think we need to make sure that our families know that the things that they do within the normal pace of the day is of great value in terms of education. And then let us take on the pedagogical kinds of things.
And what a great time to read. I mean, this is such a great time to help kids to develop that love of reading. I'll tell you that at my school, the teachers of the younger kids said that their reading groups in small groups of 3 and 4 kids were some of the best times that they've had in reading groups because they were able to just focus on those 3 or 4 kids and they learned so much. Is that the kind of thing that needs to be happening instead of Zooming with, 25-year-olds? Should it be smaller groups, or do you have a recommendation?
Well, I think it really depends on what it is as a teacher that you want to get out of that experience. And certainly having that small group time where you can do that kind of guided instruction that needs to happen, that is gold star premier time that you have with students. But there are other times too where you may be bringing together that larger group of students. And that's when you really want to be able to build the community that is happening in the classroom. That's the time where you're doing your morning routine, for example, doing calendar. We're doing the singing and the chanting together. And by the way, we have lots of opportunities for kids to get up and to move around because movement is absolutely essential to what it is that young learners need.
So as you look at distance learning, what are some of the things that you hope will happen with the younger kids in the schools where they have to go distance learning, besides what you've already stated that, let the teachers do what they need to do, let them plan ahead? What are some things you hope that teachers will go, you know what, I've never tried this before, but I'm going to try this now? What do those things need to be?
I'll speak up on behalf of families first, and that is that as educators, whether we're primary educators or we're working with older students, that we keep in mind how considerate we can make the schedule and our learning management systems for families. Very often, there is more than one child in the household that's going to school at the same time. We need to keep that in mind for families. Make sure that we are letting them know well in advance when those sessions are so that they can make plans around all of that. A second aspect of that is, as I had alluded to earlier, lots of movement, lots of breaks that are happening. You may be familiar with this. This is newer to me. I was recently introduced to a wonderful website called Go Noodle, and Go Noodle has all kinds of honestly kind of silly short videos that teachers can embed right in their practice. And what they do is they get kids up and moving. There might be a guided dance for 3 minutes, or there might be a mindfulness and breathing ritual that they can utilize. Having those kinds of activities interspersed during those live sessions is going to make all the difference for children.
Okay, so let's flip it the other direction. Fill this in. If we have to go to distance learning in a school, I hope this doesn't happen with younger learners. What do you fill in that blank?
I hope that we don't lose our younger learners because we expect them to do unnatural things in the classroom, like sitting still and paying attention for long periods of time.
Wow. Do you have a screen time recommendation for younger kids?
Well, it's interesting that the screen time recommendations from various researchers, once kids get to about the age of 5, is pretty murky. I really haven't been able to find anything that says X number of minutes or X number of hours. I think what's most important is that when we have them on screen, that we are maximizing what it is that they're doing. There's a big difference between joining your classmates and your teacher to be able to talk about calendar, sing songs, do some phonemic awareness activities, and get to know yourself and other people. There's a big difference between that and watching a video game happening or some other kind of passive experience. So the screen time that we do use, it needs to be as interactive and as involved as possible.
Well, there are a lot of things to think about for the fall, and the Distance Learning Playbook is a great resource for you from Dr. Nancy Frey and Dr. Douglas Fisher from San Diego State University. Thank you for your time, Nancy, and we're rooting for you, teachers. I'm a teacher too, and we've got a lot of things that we have to do to help our kids, but they need us in this time. Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you so much, Vicki, and thank you for what you do for all of us. I'll leave by just saying this. I feel like a first-year teacher over and over and over, and you know what? I'm okay with that.
That's a great attitude. I love it. And if you can say that, then I can say it too, right?
Exactly.
Advancement Courses is a leader in online professional development with over 280 courses in 20 different subjects, including topics like online instruction, social emotional learning, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. This back-to-school season, they are partnering with Donors Choose and donating 10% of all sales to help fund projects every day until September 25th. Visit advancementcourses.com/give to learn more and submit your project for a chance to get funded. Thank you, Advancement Courses, for sponsoring this show.